Hey guys, it's David Lightbringer, and at the recent Comic-Con House of the Dragon panel, Paddy Considine said something really interesting that I totally forgot to talk about on my recent live stream. So I'm back here with a super short video to lay it out real quick before I go and see episode 1 of House of the Dragon this week at the advanced screening. I wanted to get this idea out before I am officially spoiled and then of course bound from talking about it and spoiling you guys, so here we go. This is what Paddy Considine, who of course plays Viserys, said just this past Saturday.
But he's also carrying something else that's a kind of secret that's revealed in the show that, kind of refers to the potential fall of man in the future. So there's lots of different things going on.
Ooh, a secret. We love secrets, especially ones that refer to the fall of man. This sounds like a prophecy, and a prophecy about the Long Night and the White Walkers, right? I mean, what else could it be? We already know from the recent trailer that Viserys does have prophetic dreams, like many Targaryens. So we could be talking about a prophetic dream that Viserys had himself, or one passed down from his Targaryen or even Valyrian ancestors. That's pretty wild. Is this a change from the books? And is House of the Dragon just going to be filling in backstory of the main series like this? I mean, we know by now that George is closely involved with House of the Dragon and that he's reviewed and offered feedback on some of Ryan Condal's scripts as he was writing them. So is George potentially using House of the Dragon to slip us further exposition of the main series? Well, a few years ago, before the final season of Game of Thrones, George was giving an interview and talking about Balerion the Black Dread and other Targaryen matters, and he said this.
They began to take more interest in the affairs of Westeros, and Aegon finally decided to take over Westeros and unify the 7 kingdoms that existed at the time under a single rule. There is a lot of speculation that in some sense, he saw what was coming 300 years later and wanted to unify the 7 kingdoms to be better prepared for the threat that he eventually saw coming from the north, the threat that we're dealing with in A Song of Ice and Fire.
Everyone in the fandom took note of this, you can bet. Especially because there really hadn't been a lot of speculation about this idea. It actually sounds a lot more like something that George wanted to inject into the idea stream. So Aegon the Conqueror might have been thinking about the White Walkers when he decided to conquer Westeros and unify it into one kingdom. Was there some prophecy that we haven't heard about? A prophecy about, the fall of man? Well, yes, it would actually make a lot of sense. After all, how did the Targaryens get to Dragonstone in the first place? Supposedly, it was because of a prophetic dream of Daenys the Dreamer, the daughter of Aenar Targaryen, then the head of House Targaryen. Daenys supposedly saw the doom of Valyria in a dream 12 years before it happened, prompting Aenar to relocate all of House Targaryen from Valyria to Dragonstone, where they survived the doom and soon after became the only Dragon Lords alive. So the idea of Aegon the Conqueror, or perhaps one of his sisters, Visenya or Rhaenys, having a prophetic dream about the Long Night and essentially the doom of the entire world is very, very plausible. It's just the sort of messed up shit the Targaryens dream about. Visenya in particular was known to practice sorcery, so she stands out as a likely candidate. Now when George talks about Aegon seeing the threat coming, he is surely talking about prophetic visions, either through dreams or perhaps even via an obsidian glass candle. And once again, these could be visions experienced by Aegon or his sisters, or we could be talking about prophecies set down in ancient Valyrian scrolls that Aegon and his sisters made sense of. After all, an untold amount of magical lore was lost in the doom of Valyria, and much of whatever the Targaryens managed to save from Valyria were then burnt by Baelor the Blessed, of course. One especially thinks of Rhaegar here, who, quote, found something in a scroll one day and then turned up in the practice yard saying, "It seems I must become a warrior." That one line really tells us a lot. The obvious explanation is that Rhaegar believed his life was foretold in prophecy, or at least that he was living in an age prophesied of in the past, and that there were important things he must do. This is very likely to be part of the explanation for him and Lyanna running off and conceiving baby Jon. That's been a popular idea in the fandom for years, and the thinking is that if Rhaegar was reading prophecy about things like the White Walkers, the Bleeding Star, the Long Night, and the Prince that was promised, well, perhaps there was something about a Northern girl or a Wolf girl in there that caused him to identify Lyanna as the right mother of the potential prophesied hero, the Prince that was promised. We also have Maester Eamon, formerly known as Aemon Targaryen, of course, talking on his deathbed about, well, all sorts of things, actually. "The last dragon died before you were born," said Sam. "How could you remember them?"
"I see them in my dreams, Sam. I see a red star bleeding in the sky. I still remember red. I see their shadows on the snow, hear the crack of leathern wings, feel their hot breath. My brothers dreamed of dragons too, and the dreams killed them, everyone. Sam, we tremble on the cusp of half-remembered prophecies, of wonders and terrors that no man now living could hope to comprehend."
All right, well, there's a lot to unpack there, as they say. Confirmation that many Targaryens have dragon dreams. The insight that Aemon dreams of dragons even though he's never seen them. Something about half-remembered prophecies, which implies that some of these Targaryens are relying upon even older prophecies, perhaps by Daenys the Dreamer, or even older Valyrian ancestors. And then there was that bit about the Bleeding Star, and also dragon shadows on the snow. Those are unmistakable key elements of the Long Night and the prophecies of the Long Night. I mean, if you're a Targaryen and you have a dream of dragons flying over the snow, you'd begin to think about why dragons might need to be in the far northern part of the world. The prophecies about the Bleeding Star and the Long Night are from Ashai and date back to, well, God knows when, so a Targaryen dreaming about red comets would likely know what that's about too. Prince Rhaegar certainly did, and this is Maester Eamon on his deathbed again from that same A Feast for Crows chapter.
"No one ever looked for a girl," he said. "It was a prince that was promised, not a princess. Rhaegar, I thought the smoke was from the fire that devoured Summerhall on the day of his birth, the salt from the tears shed for those who died. He shared my belief when he was young, but later he became persuaded that it was his own son who fulfilled the prophecy. For a comet had been seen above King's Landing on the night Aegon was conceived, and Rhaegar was certain the Bleeding Star had to be a comet."
So, as you can see, Rhaegar was definitely reading books of prophecy and perhaps having prophetic dream visions of his own. Rhaegar also knew about the Azor Ahai-related prophecies from Ashai, and Rhaegar thought that they applied to him and his children. So, could it be that Rhaegar simply rediscovered whatever knowledge of the end times that Aegon and his sisters were motivated by when they conquered Westeros? It does seem likely, given that quote from George. And if King Viserys is in on these ideas as well, if he has a secret about the Long Night which he has to bear and which shapes his actions, then that suggests that this secret knowledge or secret prophecy might have been handed down through the generations of Targaryens. If so, it's pretty likely that this tradition would have died with Baelor the Blessed, who comes along a couple of generations after the time period covered by House of the Dragon and basically tries to burn or erase every bit of knowledge or tradition which isn't pious devotion to the faith of the Seven. That's why Rhaegar would have had to rediscover this knowledge, perhaps with help from Maester Eamon, perhaps prompted by his own dreams, and perhaps even by dreams influenced by Bloodraven, his ancestor, who is of course known as the Three-Eyed Crow or the Three-Eyed Raven. So when we hear that line from Daemon in the first trailer where he says, "Dreams didn't make us kings, dragons did," we can probably line that up with the dialogue from Viserys where he's explaining his dreams.
The dream. It was clearer than a memory.
Daemon clearly puts less stock in such things, at least at this point in the story. And we have to wonder if perhaps Daemon is responding to Viserys telling him about the White Walker prophecy here, or maybe about his own dream of them. I'd guess that Daemon's views on prophecy may evolve over time, especially after spending a lot of time with Mysaria, but we'll have to see what happens. We also have to ask the obvious question of how this kind of knowledge might affect Rhaenyra's story, and specifically her decision to fight for the throne. I mean, if Aegon thought he had to conquer Westeros in order to prepare it for the White Walker invasion and the Long Night, Then perhaps Rhaenyra thinks that she, can't let the throne fall into the hands of the Hightowers, who are apparently controlled by the Maesters, according to this video I saw on YouTube. It was pretty convincing, I don't know. And according to Marwyn the Mage, the Maesters are staunchly anti-magic and anti-Targaryen. We have to wonder if perhaps Viserys and Rhaenyra are discussing such secret knowledge here, in this scene in front of the skull of Aegon the Conqueror's dragon, Balerion, the Black Dread. We'll just have to wait and see what House of the Dragon does with this plotline, but I think we have enough info to know that it will be a part of the show. I think this also increases the chance that some sort of Maester conspiracy / Old Town anti-dragon activities plotline will also be a part of the show, since those two ideas kind of work together to raise the stakes of the Game of Thrones from the political to the more magical and existential threat of the Long Night. All of that has me pretty excited, and remember, House of the Dragon isn't pulling this stuff out of its ass. They're getting it from George, and like I said, George himself telegraphed this in his comments from that interview a few years ago. And really, it does make a lot of sense as something George would have been thinking about from the first. Aegon the Conqueror is kind of an empty vessel after all. I mean, no explanation is given for why he suddenly, in his early 20s, decides to conquer and unify Westeros on pain of dragon, when his family had been pretty much just chilling on Dragonstone and not conquering anyone for a whole century following the Doom. If Aegon was acting because of a prophesied threat, then he would have only been following in the footsteps of Aenar and Daenys. And he also would have been doing the exact same thing that Rhaegar did when he was alive. And the exact same thing that Daenerys and Jon will have to do in The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring. So yeah, it really does fit nicely. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. This might be my shortest video ever, or at least in a very long time. And I'll see you again from a future where I've seen the first episode of House of the Dragon. And yes, I'm very excited.